Y ahora nos vamos a centrar en un talento que viene de un poquito más lejos. Es un talento británico. Él es maestro, él es profesor, él es escritor. Es una referencia internacional de innovación educativa. Recorre el mundo impartiendo conferencias para impulsar el cambio en el ámbito de la educación, en la organización de empresas y en la propia sociedad actual. Él es autor de un bestseller que es Crear hoy la escuela del mañana. Defiende la necesidad de educar a los ciudadanos ya no del siglo XXI, sino del siglo XXII. Ha recibido muchísimos premios, entre ellos destacar, por ejemplo, el British Nacional de Enseñanza y el de la UNESCO. Y, en fin, tiene un largo currículum que mejor os va a explicar nuestro siguiente invitado. Él es el señor Borja Vara, director comercial de LinkedIn Iberia y el responsable de presentarnos a nuestro siguiente invitado, que nada estará aquí. Un aplauso para el señor Borja Vara, por favor.
Hola, buenos días a todos. Pues sí, es un honor para LinkedIn y, por supuesto, para mí presentar al siguiente ponente, a Richard. Richard, como decía Ainhoa, es uno de los expertos en educación más importantes e influyentes del mundo. Actualmente está considerado como uno de los pensadores que tiene más creatividad y originalidad en todo lo referente a liderazgo humano y a transformación organizacional. Su filosofía se basa en tres pilares fundamentales: empoderamiento, impacto y comunicación. La verdad es que sus ideas sobre la gestión del cambio se apoyan en sus más de 20 años de experiencia en el sector de la educación, donde ha estado investigando la relación entre el potencial humano y la innovación. Ha trabajado en organismos gubernamentales en el Reino Unido, en asociaciones deportivas de primer nivel y en multinacionales tan importantes como Google, Telefónica o Microsoft. Ha sido nombrado 2 veces como conferenciante de negocios del año y ha publicado, como bien decía Ainhoa, 3 libros que se han convertido en auténticos bestsellers. Aparte de este libro sobre la educación, el Crear la escuela del mañana, que es una referencia en educación en las últimas décadas, también ha escrito Simple Thinking y un libro sobre el cambio. El cambio, aprende a quererlo y aprende a liderarlo. Richard también es considerado como uno de los líderes más inspiracionales de su generación y uno de los conferenciantes mejores del mundo. Sus conferencias siempre están cargadas de pasión, están cargadas de provocación y sobre todo de sentido del humor. Y siempre giran en torno a la idea de que las personas son las responsables de las transformaciones en las organizaciones, no los sistemas y no las estructuras. Y aquí es donde engarza precisamente con nuestra compañía, con LinkedIn, porque LinkedIn también pone a las personas en el centro de las organizaciones, en el centro de todas las decisiones. Para empezar, la máxima número 1 de nuestra compañía es que los usuarios son lo primero. Cada decisión que se toma en la empresa, bien sea de la plataforma, de producto o bien sea de negocio, pasa por respondernos a la pregunta de si va a ser bueno, si va a ser óptimo para los casi 600 millones de profesionales que están en la red. LinkedIn apuesta por el talento. Internamente consideramos que un empleado feliz es un empleado mucho más productivo y eso es lo que queremos transmitir a nuestros clientes. Les apoyamos en proyectos que tienen que ver con la atracción, comunicación y desarrollo de ese talento y no solo lo hacemos desde el punto de vista del convencimiento, sino también desde el punto de vista de los datos. Probamos con resultados, medimos el impacto que tiene la gestión de las personas en las organizaciones. LinkedIn tiene una misión muy clara, que es conectar a todos los profesionales del mundo para que sean más productivos y más exitosos. Y lo hacemos basándonos en nuestra cultura y en nuestros valores, es decir, nuestras personas. Y ahí es donde precisamente coincidimos y nos encanta apoyar ideas como las que sostiene Richard Gerver. Un aplauso.
Hola. Buenos días. That's it. That's all I have. It's amazing. It's an honor, a privilege to be with you today. I want to start with an observation. And it's an observation I think it would be interesting to discuss as we take this theme forwards. For many years, everyone in this room, everybody involved in the digital and future economy has talked a lot about the war for talent, the fight for talent. We've talked about it for 10, 15, 20 years. And I think this is the challenge. Because whilst I think people who understand the challenge moving into the 22nd century, because by the way, I think talking about the 21st century as if it's the future, really? Let's be clear here. Kids who are starting school now could well be living and working in the 22nd century. Our future consumers, they've done the 21st century. It's over for them, right? So we get that. And we get that the future is dependent on this nurturing of future talent. But I think the challenge comes from the fact that many people at policy level and with and in education aren't fighting for talent. I worry that they're fighting with talent. And I want to start by sharing a couple of observations with you to try and explain what I mean. You see, I think that the future is incredibly bright. I've hung out with kids for nearly 30 years. And I truly believe that the generations of young people that I've been privileged enough to work with over the last few years are the most talented generation the world has ever created. Let me start by asking you a question. How many of you have got children of your own at home? Can you raise your hands if you have children? Keep your hands in the air. I know parents are too exhausted to raise their hands. I know that. I get that. Keep your hand in the air if you have or have survived having teenage children. Yeah, for those of you that just put your hands down, I'm so sorry. For those of you with your hands in the air, you, like me, will not be in a hurry to go home tonight. Right? I have two kids. One's just left home. The other one, don't come back. The other one is nearly 18, and it's a boy. It's a double whammy. It's why I won't be going home, actually, until he's 25. But that's another story. But I want to tell you about him, an experience I had with him just a couple of years ago. Now, to put this into context, my son is a very normal teenage boy. He's not special, he's not gifted, he's just a teenage boy. He does all the things that teenage boys do. His room smells. It looks like a war zone. He doesn't talk in any language I understand most of the time. He's gone back. You know how teenage boys are. They go back to being primeval. They go to bed the night before their 13th birthday. They're eloquent. They're lovely. Good night, Daddy. I love you. See you tomorrow morning. They wake up the next morning. That's my son. He's just average. But recently, a few years ago now, I had to call him down for the evening meal in our house. And by the way, for all of you that work in technology, do not tell me it improves society. I'll tell you why. My job in our house in the evenings has always been to call our children down for the evening meal. It's a bit like the call to prayer in certain religions, right? And the reason I got that job, two reasons. One, because my wife ate one of the meals I cooked once, and it took her 3 weeks to get over it. So she cooks. And secondly, because I have the loudest voice in our house. Now, in the olden days, before technology, I used to be great at my job of calling my children down for their evening meal. My wife would say, Richard, the meal is ready. I would go, kids! Dinner! And they would come running downstairs, like a scene from The Sound of Music. Remember The Sound of Music? They'd come downstairs singing as they walked down the stairs. Then what happened was technology came along. And my son discovered noise-cancelling headphones. This meant I couldn't call him for dinner anymore. So then I bought him a mobile phone, which was brilliant because I used to text him that it was time for dinner in capital letters with exclamation marks. Until he blocked me from his mobile phone. So now, technology has not improved my life. Because now, for the first time ever, I actually physically have to go to his bedroom to collect him for his evening meal. Solve that problem, digital technology people, right? So I now go up to his room. This is a couple of years ago. I knock on his door. He can't hear me, of course, because he's got his headphones on. And he's playing a computer game, right? So I just walk in. And his back is to me, and he's facing the screens. You know what our kids look like these days. One screen isn't enough. He now has 3 screens, and his phone, and his tablet, and his friend's tablet, and my tablet. All of it in his room, right? He's listening to some urban rap while playing, again, headphones on, talking to somebody on the other end of the something. You see, I'm not into technology. He's talking to something, somewhere. I don't know where, through the tubes. Right? And I'm not going to disturb him. And he's engrossed in his game. And he's playing FIFA football, which is like his game, right? FIFA football or Call of Duty. That's it. Now he plays Fortnite as well. But FIFA football, Call of Duty. He's on FIFA and he's playing. And I expected to see this. What I didn't expect was to hear what he was saying. Because this was truly miraculous. Right? Remember where we are. We are British. We don't speak anybody else's language. We don't, as you know, we don't. All we do is do what I'm doing now, which is speak English louder and slower. And to us, that's why we think we are capable of leaving Europe. Anyway, it's just nice to be here, because who knows how much longer I'll be invited. I don't know. So anyway, he's there and he's playing. And the reason for the miracle is because, say, he's not even learning one of the languages he learns at school. Because in England, we don't learn foreign languages to speak them. We learn foreign languages, like everything else, to take examinations in them. This is a different thing entirely, right? So my son is learning French and German. Don't know why either, but he's learning French and German, right? He can't speak a word, but he's doing really well in his studies, okay? He is speaking Russian fluently. Right? One of the most complicated languages to learn in the world. There were a number of things going to my head when I saw him and heard him speaking Russian. One was amazement, like, oh my God, that's incredible. He's speaking Russian. The second one, though, was, oh my God, I hope it wasn't you that hacked the American elections. He's watching the World Cup now with the Russian commentary. Work that out, right? Now, as he comes off his game, I'm stood in amazement, looking at my son in awe. And I'm saying to him, how? How? And he did that thing boys do to their father. I said, but how? He said, well, I've been playing FIFA online for a long time now. He said, and I've been playing in a number of tournaments. And a year or so ago, I met Sergey. And Sergey is from just outside Moscow. And Sergey and I became friends. And so we meet every week now to play FIFA together. Sometimes we enter a tournament as a team. I didn't know you could do that. And he said, and sometimes we just hang out and play. He said it was never a thing. We never agreed that he would teach me Russian and I would teach him English. It's just happened. He said, so I don't even think about it. So there's a thought for you, right? Our kids do not need to be taught how to use digital technology. They know more about digital technology than anyone in this room. And I don't care who you are, but if you have children, you know what I'm talking about. right? I got signed up to Facebook a couple of years ago. I was so proud. My son went, nobody uses Facebook. You are so old. Right? They are miles ahead, and they are digital natives to a whole new level. Digital technology to them is like oxygen is to us. It's just there. And one of the problems with education is we believe that we have to teach children how to use technology. No, we don't. What we have to do is help our children understand how to use their technology to change the world. That's what we need to do. Right? So, let me give you the second thought I have, and it's a little bit more serious, but something the more I think about it, the more optimistic it makes me. So, as you all know, a few months ago now, the latest horror in American school shootings occurred in Parkland in Florida. We all remember that moment. And most of us were sat there going, oh God, not again. And then anger hits, right? Because we're all thinking, why are they not doing something about the gun laws in America? And everybody's tried, haven't they? I mean, even President Obama tried to change the gun laws in America and failed. Right? They've all tried, apart from Donald Trump, of course. But what happened after the shooting at the Parkland school, in the school at Parkland in Florida, was truly extraordinary. As we all know, that group of 17-year-old students set up the Never Again campaign. And around the world, we saw their eloquence and their courage and their bravery. And frankly, their genius. Because these young people have probably had the greatest impact on the gun laws debate in America ever in history of anybody. And we all thought, this is rare. How did this happen? Well, let me explain how that happened. So the school's name, some of you may remember, was the Marjory Stoneman Douglas School. Now, if you look up Marjory Stoneman Douglas, you will realize that she was a legendary campaigner in America, an extraordinary campaigner for women's rights, and also, most powerfully, she was probably the person who was most influential in America protecting the Everglades in Florida. So she was an environmental and equalities campaigner before the environment and equality became trendy, right? Way before. An amazing, eloquent woman, unbelievably strong and powerful. A leader. She started as a journalist. And she gave her name to this school. Now, this school, the Marjory Stoneman Douglas School in Parklands, Florida, has for many, many years had a reputation of running probably the finest civics and democracy program of any public school in America. This is significant. Because when that lunatic decided to attack that school and those children, they were ready to respond. They'd been trained to respond for generations. Those children had a heightened understanding of democracy and civics. But most importantly, those young people knew how to use social media and digital technology on a level that most company CEOs and politicians had no idea about. And so they started and led the Never Again movement, which has had unbelievable impact. So here's another thought for you, right? If what we do is we work together to help young people understand the system they live in, they have the technological genius to change the system. So maybe what we need to do is stop criticizing children because of the technology they use, because of the world we live in. And what we need to start doing is helping them understand how they use that technology to change their world and our world. And I worry when we talk about digital technology in education that we spend far too long talking about how do we teach it to children. whereas actually our job should be much bigger. You see, we've had thousands of silver bullets in education over the last 20 years. People that have come along and sold us the idea of how we teach digital technology in our schools. We put interactive whiteboards in our schools, and we stood back and we went, there you go. There's the future. And teachers used them just like they used to use chalkboards. And then we put Wi-Fi in our schools, and people stood back and went, there's the future. And people didn't use it properly because now they just use tablets and laptops to teach the same stuff in the same way. You go into schools in Spain now, and some schools in Spain still think their job when teaching technology is to teach children how to use Excel and Word. Seriously? Right? We've got to move the conversation. We've got to move the conversation away from silver bullets and quick fixes. What we have to do as a business community is engage with the education community on a level that says these are the skills, the behaviors, the attitudes, the outlook that our young people need in the workplace to make a difference. We trust that they'll be able to use the technology. You know, it's really interesting, and if I have time, I'll come back to it. Google, and I think there's people here from Google, will know only too well that when Larry and Sergey set up Google, they were very snobby about technologists. They believed that Google could only succeed if you had brilliant programmers and brilliant technologists. And then a few years ago, and I'm sure most of you have read it and heard about it, they carried out two significant pieces of internal research, Project Oxygen and Project Aristotle, which looked at why their leadership teams were successful and why their people were successful. And what amazed Sergey and Larry and the senior leaders at Google was technical ability came seventh in the list of reasons why Google was so successful. The 6 above were all to do with human behaviors and attitudes and entrepreneurship and creativity and problem solving and the ability to collaborate. We need to remember, and we mustn't make the mistake of thinking by teaching children how to program in schools, our job's done. Because you know what the education system will do. They'll say, okay, so we have to create a programming curriculum. We'll make sure there's plenty of exams at the end of it. So kids might be able to program, but they won't be able to talk the language of technology. In the same way that my son learnt German and French, but can't speak a word of German and French. Because it's something about something bigger, deeper, more important. And we don't need every child in Spain to be able to program. We've got programmers. What we need are the geniuses in Spain that understand how to use technology to solve new problems. That's what we need. So we've got to shift the conversation. And maybe to do that, and I was asked to be controversial today, so I hope I'm doing my job. In order to do that, maybe sometimes we need to always stop looking forwards. Because one of my other fears with education, when we talk about new education and increasing digital learning in education, is that we're always talking about the silver bullets, the new things we need to do. And I worry sometimes that we've forgotten about the real human stuff that makes the difference to people. I mean, let's remember, Zuckerberg did not set up Facebook to connect the world. He set up Facebook so that he could grade the best-looking girls on campus and get a date. We may laugh, but this is how these brilliant things come about, right? It doesn't come about because we're wowed by technology. It comes about because people have human problems they can see need solving, and then they say, how can technology solve those human problems? The most powerful digital companies in the world have not gone and created digital gleaming technology and just sold it. What they've done is sold social solutions. Google Google wasn't created by Larry and Sergey because they wanted to make billions of dollars. It was created by Larry and Sergey because they had a deep philosophical belief that by organizing the world's information and by making it available to everybody, you could actually decrease evil and democratize the world. It was only when Eric Schmidt came on board and he said, boys, we need to find a way to repay our investors, that they realized they had to monetize the concept properly. So it's not about technology for technology's sake. It's about technology solving human problems, isn't it? That's what you do every day. So let's not make the mistake of thinking, teach the kids the technology and the rest will come. Wrong. They can teach themselves the technology. All they need is YouTube. They don't need us to do that for them. What they need is for us to help them understand how to use their technological knowledge to solve problems and change the world. So let's maybe think that what we need to do is remember that in the relentless digitization of our world, that some of the things children need help with is remembering why the world is worth fighting for. I have very few memories of my early childhood, but I do have a few. And one I have that was very significant was when I was 7 years old. And I remember it very clearly because it was 1976. And I know as you're doing the math, you're thinking, he can't be that old. Thank you so much. 1976, and the reason I remember it was 1976 was because the only summer in British history where we actually had sunshine. It was hot that year. It was really hot that year. And I remember I was at little school, and I remember one day in particular that it was a really hot day for London, and I was in a London school, so we just had like a building and nothing much else. There was a park, a public park across the road, right? And I remember coming back from my lunch and sitting in my classroom with all the other 7-year-olds, and our teacher, oh God, we loved our teacher. She was amazing. She was. We always remember the wonderful ones and the ones we hate, don't we? Well, she was one that I loved. And I particularly loved her on this day because we walked into class and we're all sat there and she's doing the afternoon registration. And then she says, now children, this afternoon we should be doing mathematics. And I'm sorry, even if you love mathematics, in 100 degrees of heat after a proper lunch and the sun's shining outside and it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, nobody wants to do mathematics. And she said, do you want to do mathematics? And we all went, no! There was one child, you know the child everyone hates in school? There was one child, I'll never forget her. She went, yes, I do! And we all just looked at her and said, you are going to die later. But clearly the teacher didn't want to do mathematics either. So she said, shall we go to the park? And we said, yes! So we all got out of our seats and we walked across the road and we walked into the park and we went and sat under a tree. I remember it as if it was yesterday. We went and sat under a tree. And she just said, I'm going to read you a story. I was 7. And I remember it like it was yesterday. And I remember lying there under that tree with the grass just tickling my neck. I remember the breeze blowing the leaves of the tree gently. And I remember the tone of her voice. And the reason I share this story with you was because it was a profound moment. I remember even as a 7-year-old child thinking to myself, I'm not sure my life will ever get any better than this. This is simple. This is wonderful. I can hear the birds. I can feel the breeze. I can feel the warmth. I can feel the grass on my neck. And let me tell you something. I have been a passionate campaigner for the environment all my life. And often people ask me why. And I think it was that moment. That moment as a 7-year-old boy that I realized our world was worth fighting for. The freedoms, the environment, equity, teachers, education, all the things that I'm passionate about now came from that one experience as a 7-year-old child. And one of the questions I ask is, as a community with so much passion for technology, do we need to make sure that actually we emphasize to our educators how important it is that they connect our children to the real world as well as to the virtual world? Because our future problem solvers will only come from people that are three-dimensional, from people that deeply connect with the world around them as well as the virtual world they already exist in. I go back to the founding of Google and the founding of Facebook. They're about human connections. They're about emotions, relationships. They are not about let's just create technology and make lots of money. So one of the things I do worry about in the world our children live in, including my son, is are they connected enough to the real world to be able to understand the real world problems that are faced and then how they can use technology to solve those problems. So again, I ask you to think about flipping the problem. And similarly, when we talk about this, not only do we have a massive challenge of connecting the young people in Spain to technology and to technological industry, there is a subgroup, isn't there, that we always hear about, and that's girls. I don't want to talk about this for long, but I do want to beg you something, right? Because I've seen this all over the world. Do not think that by painting technology pink, you are going to attract young women into STEM or STEAM careers. It ain't going to happen. Do not patronize my daughter and her friends. Please, right? They might like pink things, but then so does my son. But this isn't enough. Tokenism is not the way you get kids involved in technology. Let's just think about young women for a minute. I would argue, and there is always going to be the gender thing about kids. We know that girls, whether you raise your children, I have a boy and a girl, right? And I've raised them both the same. My girl tends to like girl things, and my son tends to like boy things on the whole, right? But let's remember something here. Girls are born technologists. Just remember this, right? Boys aren't. Boys are born picking their nose and scratching their bottoms. We are primal. I'm sorry, we are. Girls are born technologists. And what I mean by that is girls are born unbelievably curious, unbelievably creative. They are pragmatic. They are problem solvers. They are emotionally intelligent, younger than boys. That's what the evidence will tell us. I'm not saying one's better than the other, but girls are born that way. You think about young girls, and I know it's a generalization, but the majority of young girls become interested in fashion very young. Fashion is technology. Young girls become interested in makeup and beauty and hair young. That's technology. You tell me that the science involved in creating makeup isn't technology. You tell me the science involved in beauty products and shampoos and conditioners aren't technology. You tell me that the advances in the fashion industry and clothing design aren't technology. Our problem is not that girls aren't interested in technology, it's that we don't understand what technology is in education. Our kids are technologists. Our girls are powerful technologists. So it's not about painting computers pink. It's about helping young women understand that the things they're passionate about and interested in are already technology. And then, of course, there is the issue of getting our female role models in front of those young women to help them understand the power of the technology that they're involved in. So again, let's not be tokenistic about this, all right? If we're going to build programs to get young women into technology, we have to start from their starting point. We have to explain how they're already technologists and then show them how what we're working on can truly make a difference to their future and actually possibly for their career choices. And this brings me back to Eric Schmidt, the executive chairman, or just recently, I think, retired executive chairman of Google. A few years ago, had the chance to have lunch with Eric, or E, as I like to call him. Don't ask me how a former teacher blagged his way into a one-to-one lunch with Eric Schmidt, but it's amazing how far a big mouth can get you, right? Now, because I'm British, I'm arrogant, as you know, we are. And Eric was coming over from America. He was launching a book, right? And he was over for a week, and I got my chance to have lunch with him. And I'm thinking, when I go for lunch with Eric Schmidt, I need to make him feel relaxed in my company. What? One of the most powerful leaders on the planet, and I'm thinking I need to make him chill out in my... He'll be nervous meeting me. Even my wife was like, you're an idiot. So I arrived at lunch with Eric at this restaurant in London, and I thought, I know what I'm going to do. I need to find common ground. This is how you build relationships, right? Find common ground quickly and easily. So I thought what I'm going to do is ask him, while he's been in London, if he's been to any other nice restaurants. And then I'm basically going to lie. So in other words, if he says, oh yes, I've been to this restaurant or this, I'm going to pretend that I've been there too. So that immediately we have common ground. You see, this is my plan. So we arrive at the restaurant and we're sitting down and I'm drinking wine and he's drinking water because he's from California. His body's a temple. And we're sat there and we're over lunch. And so I used my strategy. I said, oh, have you been anywhere nice while you've been here for restaurants and eating? And he said, well, actually we have. He said, last night we had the most extraordinary French meal. And I thought, this is my moment right now. This is the moment I connect, right? Because I was going to lie, and I was going to go further. You know, if he said, oh, we went to this restaurant, this French restaurant in London, and there are lots of nice French restaurants in London, I was going to say, oh, yes, I've been there many times. I know the maitre d', was going to be what I was going to say. So he said, yes, we went for a fantastic French meal. I said, oh, where? He said, well, actually, and this was the moment I realized that teachers and the chief executive officers of the world's most powerful company do not lead similar lives. He said, well, actually, we took the jet to Paris. So anyway, it didn't start well. But then we got into a conversation that I want to share with you because I think it's pertinent and relevant. And it's this. He said, you know, the really interesting thing about education is, and I stopped him. I said, no, let me ask you a question. The question I want to ask you is, do you ever see a time where the teacher will be replaced by technology? Because I thought if anyone's going to argue for the power of technology, it's Eric Schmidt. So I said, do you ever see a time where the teacher will be replaced by technology? And I thought we're going to have a debate here. And his answer was immediate and certain. He didn't even blink before he replied. He said, no, never. And I was like, wow, I wasn't expecting that. He said, I'll explain. He said, technology is extraordinary. It is an unbelievable catalyst. It is a tool that is changing and will continue to change society. Hopefully for the better, but we can't guarantee that. He said, but it is one of the most significant things in human history, without doubt. He said, but education is about the development of human beings. And in order to develop human beings, you will always need high levels of human interaction. And that means you will always need human teachers. Because the rest is just stuff. Stuff isn't learning. Learning only happens when you connect your knowledge to the world and to the challenges around you. And I think, by the way, that's something we struggle with in a lot of countries in education, and particularly in Spain. We are so obsessed with feeding children with information that we forget that's only 50% of the job. And then we kick them out into the world, and because we've tested what they've remembered, we think they're clever. And then you guys employ these people because they've got qualifications, and suddenly you realize they're not quite as clever as you think. They might know stuff, but they don't have the ability to use it. right? Which leads me on to the second part of my conversation with Eric. And it's this. I said to him, what are the greatest challenges you face at Google? He said, well, I'll tell you. He said, when I first joined Google, it was the most exciting place I'd ever worked. It was an ideas factory. He said, we were passionate about our vision, organize the world's information, make it available for everybody, and by so doing, diminish evil. We were passionate about it. He said, in every idea, in every corridor, in every department at Google, people were just flinging ideas out and sharing them with colleagues, and then getting those colleagues to work up concepts. And then when we were pitching the concepts and trying to drive them forward, he said, that's where Google Earth came from. It came from a conversation where one woman in a creative team said, why don't we map the world in images so anyone can visit anywhere from anywhere? That's where it came from. He said, the greatest challenge at Google has been our success. He said, the more successful we've become, the more the tone of the meetings changed. We stopped believing in our vision and our values and our talent and our ability, and we stopped being proactive. We started spending too much time and energy being reactive. We started being obsessed with what other people were doing and other organizations were working on. And he said, when I track our greatest disasters, they have always come from when we've tried to work on what somebody else was already doing. He said, my greatest challenge at Google is to keep our people focused on us, on our ability, on our belief, on our vision, on our values, and most importantly, to respect their talent. Now, one of the problems with education and silver bullets is I'm not sure we trust ourselves anymore. I was asked by a journalist outside before what I think the most important issue in education is, and it's this. What is Spain's vision for education? Because I don't know. What is the purpose of education in Spain? Is it just to be better than China in PISA? What is it? What is the clarity, right? What kind of people does Spain want to create through its education system in a global community, in a globally competitive environment? What should mark Spanish children out? Should it be Spanish heritage and culture? Should it be that they're unbelievably creative, that they're explorers, that they're risk takers, that they're people that are prepared to push the boundaries of the world? Because let's face it, that's what Spain's history is built on. Probably the most creative and exploratory country on earth. Does that show in its education system? I'd argue not. I'd argue that we're so busy trying to catch up with everybody else that we've forgotten about our own purpose and sense and value. And that leads me to finish. If I got just 5 minutes to finish with a final story about another tech god that I've met. And the reason I'm telling you about the tech gods that I've met is because that I'm very clear that you have no idea who I am. So what I like to do is tell you about the famous people I've met. So that if you decide to shake my hand later, you know who else has shaken my hand. And I haven't washed it, just so that you know. So a few years ago, I was invited to give a speech in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh. And I only went because of who the other keynote speaker was. And they said to me, look, Richard, if you come, we will give you 5 minutes in a room, private time, with this other person. Because I wasn't important. But the other speaker was a man I believe has changed the world. A man is a personal hero to me, right? So I'm preparing to go out to Riyadh to do my speech, which I have to tell you I wasn't even thinking about my speech. I was just thinking about my 5 minutes with my hero. And I overthought it, right? I even got to the level where I got my son to help me practice how I was going to say hello. Right, do you bow? Do you kiss his hand? Do you curtsy? Do you modern, I don't know. Anyway, I practiced. And then I thought, I've got 5 minutes in this man's company. And that means I've got time to ask him one question. This is a man I believe has changed the world. And I've got 5 minutes, one question. So for weeks before, I practice my hello and I practice my question. I get to Riyadh, I do my speech. I come off stage. They take me to the room where my hero is waiting. And as I'm walking towards the room, I'm thinking, be calm. Remember your hello. Focus on your question. This will be cool. Be cool, be cool, be cool. As the door opens to the room and my hero is stood opposite me, and my hero is Steve Wozniak, the creator of Apple, right? As he stood opposite me, cool went out the window. All that came out of my mouth was, "Oh my God, it's really you!" He was cool. He just, hi. I don't know if you've ever met Voz. Hi. And I went up to him, and as I'm walking up to him, I'm thinking, you've already embarrassed yourself, right? You've blown the hello. Do not blow the question. There are hundreds of people back in the UK waiting to hear his answer, right? So I went up to him, I thought, okay, I've got the question. Anyway, I was fine until our skin touched, and I shook hands, and my mind went blank. So I'm in a room with a man I believe has changed the world. I've got time to ask him one question. And all that came out of my mouth on this particular occasion was, this is true, and I can't believe I'm sharing my humiliation with you. All that came out of my mouth was, can I have a selfie? Which was bad enough. What made it even worse? And I know they're here today too, so they'll be very proud of this. As we both looked up into the camera lens on my phone, in that same moment, we both realized that I was holding a bloody Samsung. So, amazingly enough, I recovered and I got the chance to talk to him on the plane on the way home, which was a miracle. Can you imagine when I found out I was sat next to him on the plane, I was like, he was like, oh my God. And we got talking, and here's where I'm going to finish. We talked about many things, right? But what I want to share with you is this. He talked about the philosophy of the kind of people they hired at Apple in the early days. He said at first it was easy, because we just hired our friends, and people our friends recommended. And we'd travel around America, and we just plucked them out of college or wherever they were, and we just hired our friends. That was easy. He said, but because of the way jobs was, and the money that was being thrown at us, we were going to have to upscale really, really, really fast, right? So that meant we were going to have proper recruitment systems. So one night we went out for a beer to talk about what kind of people we were going to recruit. He said, you know, there's a lot of rubbish written about Steve Jobs. He said, most of it is myth. He said, but that night he did say something that really, really mattered. He said to me that night, he said, you know what was? If we're to make this company work, we can't just hire clever people. That isn't enough. And what he meant by clever people was the people being pumped out of universities at Stanford, the people heading to Silicon Valley from all over the world like it was the gold rush, people with masters and doctorates in computer technology and science and physics and mathematics. He said, we can click our fingers in this valley and hire 100 of those tomorrow. That ain't enough. We need different people. And so that night they came up with a mantra, a promise. And it must work, by the way, because Apple still use it today as a central core of their hiring and people development philosophy. And it's what I'm going to leave you with. It's a challenge, really. Because if we're serious about changing the education system, about knitting the digital future with our children, this is the challenge we all have to face. And like all things that Apple create, on the surface, it's beautifully elegant and brilliantly simple. But underneath, the detail and the complexity is extraordinary. Because, of course, to achieve simplicity takes genius. This was their promise. They said, at Apple, we will never employ anyone who needs managing. So surely that's our challenge. How do we work with education to create generations of young people that are no longer trained to be managed, but are actually trained to manage themselves? Thank you very much. Thank you.